Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the homeowners association that built a swimming pool on my property. I didn't buy a place near the mountains to start a land war with a homeowners association. I bought it because the wind on the ridge sounds like ocean waves when it hits the pines, because evenings turn purple and smell like sage, and because the property line, marked by a wavy split-rail fence and 4 granite corner monuments set in the 80s, felt as permanent as the rock underneath. I wanted starry nights, trailhead mornings, and to tinker in my garage without anyone measuring the height of my trash cans. What I got instead was a concrete swimming pool that appeared one spring like an alien landing pad, half on land I owned free and clear. The first time I saw the rebar cage, I thought it was a skate park. The second time, when shotcrete was already curing under mountain sun, I realized the poor deck ran clean past the old fence line, over my meadow, and right up to a juniper I'd promised myself never to cut. If you've ever had one of those moments where your mind lags a full 10 seconds behind your eyes, you'll understand. My truck idled while I stared. 50 feet of deck, a kidney-shaped basin, the glossy blue tile border flashing like a wink. I shut off the engine and walked in a straight line until the toe of my boot hit one of my corner monuments, a squat granite block with a chiseled cross. From there, I paced to the boundary along my survey map, which I keep laminated in the glove box like a security blanket. The crunch of gravel sounded wrong under the pool's edge. I don't live inside any HOA. My cabin sits on an older parcel that predates the subdivision downhill. They formed an association when they built. New roofs, tidy mail kiosks, tennis courts, the usual. Their lots stop well short of my place. But well short is apparently a flexible concept when you want a splashy new amenity to boost home values. And whoever said, "It's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission," never tried that line with a property owner who still has the original deed and a drawer full of high-vis flagging tape. I hiked down to the community office the next morning with my old survey and a thermos of coffee. Their office sits in a converted model home with scented plugins and framed posters about pool rules that, at the time, didn't exist. I found the manager, a guy who introduced himself as Tobin, in a crisp polo shirt. He had the airy confidence of someone used to telling people that their front door wreaths don't meet standards. "Good morning," he said, as if we were fast friends. "Here to sign up for the new amenities?" "Not exactly." I placed the laminated survey on his desk. "Your new pool is 31 feet over my north boundary. That's my land." He smiled like I'd told a joke. "We had a boundary survey during construction." "Great," I said. "You can show it to me." The smile faltered. He fiddled with a stapler. "Our board president is handling all infrastructure documents. Do you want to leave your contact info?" "I'll wait." He made a call, using that syrupy voice people use when they think they're diffusing explosives. 10 minutes later, the board president breezed in like the leading actor entering a stage. She was tall, with perfect posture and a gold bracelet that chimed when she gestured. "I'm Marla," she said, shaking my hand with fingers that never quite curled. She gave the survey a glance like you might give a raffle ticket, politely, with low expectations. "We have a sealed survey on file," she said, "and we have a county permit." "You might have both," I said, "and still be wrong. My deed is meets and bounds. Nobody moved those granite monuments. Your pool deck is over the line." Marla looked past me, out the window, as if her pool would materialize on the correct side if she stared hard enough. "The county approved it," she repeated. "We relied on professionals." "Then call your professionals," I said, "because I didn't give you an easement, and you don't get one by accident." That was the start. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I did what my father taught me when something you own is being nibbled. Take notes, take pictures, and take a breath before you take action. I went home, photographed the cornerstones, found the old survey pins with a cheap metal detector, and staked them with bright pink flagging that looked almost festive in the meadow. I got my own surveyor out within the week, a quiet woman named Kimball who talked to the land like it could hear her. She reshot the line, mapped the encroachment, and gave me a stamped color print that showed exactly where their concrete belly flopped onto my parcel. I hand-delivered a copy to the HOA office with a letter titled in big block font, "Notice of Trespass and Demand to Abate." I quoted the property statutes that apply in my state, the ones that make it plain you cannot build on someone else's land and then claim it later because it's pretty. I wasn't asking for money, not yet. I asked them to remove the encroaching portion and restore my meadow, or if they preferred, to relocate the pool. I gave them 30 days and sent a copy certified mail to the board's registered agent, because there's always a registered agent, even for a collection of cul-de-sacs with nice landscaping. The next 2 weeks were a slow boil. Construction didn't stop. They slapped up a flimsy 6-foot fence, put in a drip line with scraggly shrubs, and installed a gate with a keypad that beeped like a microwave. Their contractor ran a fill line across my land to tie into an old standpipe that had been capped years ago, and every time I heard water rush, I felt my molars align. When I confronted the foreman, a sunburned guy named Mark who had the tired eyes of someone married to deadlines, he raised his hands and said, "I go where the plans say." Marla called me once. "We've reviewed your letter," she said, each word polished. "Our council believes we are within our rights. The county inspector signed off on the pour. Also, I think you should know that your old fence is non-conforming with the fire code for defensible space." The whiplash almost made me laugh. "I'm not inside your association," I said. "Your rules are not my rules, and county approval doesn't trump title." Her voice took on a sweetness that felt sticky. "I'd hate to see this become adversarial. You and I are neighbors." "We're not neighbors," I said, keeping my voice level. "Neighbors ask before they pour concrete." I didn't sleep much after that. I'd stand on my porch and watch their construction lights glow while night animals stayed away, confused by the sudden day. My dog, Moose, a lazy, dignified hound, would huff and circle and finally collapse with a groan as if even he were offended. The meadow that had been my winter snowshoe track now snapped with construction wheels. A long trench ran like a scar from the old standpipe to the pump house, with fresh PVC glinting in the sun before they buried it. I started documenting everything: dates, times, names. It's soothing to line up facts when feelings are trying to run you around. On day 29, I got a letter back from the HOA's attorney on thick paper with an embossed header that practically thumped when it hit my table. The gist was elegant and wrong. He said their survey showed the line farther north. He said they had relied in good faith on county approvals. He appended a proposed solution, that I sign a permanent easement allowing the encroachment in exchange for a one-time consideration of $5,000 and a lifetime family pass to the pool. I laughed out loud in my kitchen by myself. $5,000 wouldn't cover the cost of moving the juniper they'd poured next to if it hadn't been rooted to the earth since before I was born. The lifetime family pass was the kind of perk you offer someone who likes pool noodles and HOA newsletters. I made coffee and wrote back a blunt little note that my attorney friend Laura helped me polish. No easement, no pass, no deal. I included a second copy of Kimball's stamped drawing and a reminder that every day the encroachment remained was a fresh trespass, and that I would pursue damages, costs, and attorney's fees. I told them the offer would get worse with time. On day 31, they held a ribbon cutting. I watched from my porch with binoculars while a small crowd gathered, clapped, and took selfies in front of a balloon arch. Marla wore a sash that said, "Community." A pastor prayed. Someone sliced a sheet cake. Children jumped into water that was, no exaggeration, standing on my dirt. Here is the part where you may think I snapped. The headline version would say I stormed down with a crowbar and broke something. I didn't. I staged the most boring rebellion possible. I called 811 to mark utilities. I called the county stormwater office. I bought 2 sump pumps rated for continuous duty. And I spent a Saturday building a dry well just past my tree line, lined with crushed rock and landscape fabric, sized according to the very conservative charts your average trench drain nerd keeps on a spreadsheet. When the stormwater guy called me back, I explained. He said, "You're discharging on your property?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're not letting it run across the road?" I said, "No." He said, "Then I'm not your guy, but document everything." I also filed, with Laura's help, an action in the local court, a straightforward suit for trespass to land, encroachment, and injunctive relief. Her firm is small, but she is retriever tenacious. We included photos, blew up Kimball's survey on a big sheet, and asked for a preliminary injunction requiring the HOA to stop using the encroaching portion and to cease filling the pool. The judge scheduled a hearing 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I kept doing the most neighborly thing I could think of. I made sure nobody drowned on my side. The day I turned on the pumps, the sky was hard blue and the air smelled like hot pine. I ran heavy-gauge extension cords from my garage to the edge of the deck, placed the pump intakes on my side of the pool, and threaded discharge hoses to my dry well. Then I flipped the switches. The motors thrummed. Water gushed like a faucet in a giant's house. Somewhere down the hill, a choir of small voices went flat as the water line slid down the tile. I sat on a camp chair with a jug of ice water and watched the world's most satisfying trickle. I wasn't touching their equipment. I wasn't breaking anything. I was removing a trespass from my land by the least destructive means possible. Exactly what Lara said a judge would expect before granting more extreme relief. After an hour, a maintenance guy jogged over, looking bewildered. Sir, what are you doing?" "Draining my side," I said, pointing to the cornerstone sunk flush with the concrete. "You can't do that." "I can," I said, "and I am." He left. 10 minutes later, Tobin showed up, breathing heavy, polo untucked. "Please turn those off," he said. "You're damaging association property." "It's on my property," I said, calm as a pond. "I'm abating a trespass. You can help by turning off your fill line." He started to argue, then looked at the steady stream disappearing into the dry well. "I'm calling the president," he said, and retreated with the speed of a man hoping the boss arrives before the building burns. Marla came in a cardigan even though it was 80 degrees. She took in the hoses, the pumps, and me in my chair like a disappointed teacher beholding a gum chewer. "This is unacceptable," she said. "You're sabotaging community property." "I'm preventing an ongoing trespass," I said. "There's a difference." "You are creating a liability," she said, gesturing at the cords. "If someone trips, I'm on my land," I said. "The cords are staked, and your lifeguard can tell swimmers to use the deep end. Better yet, you can shut the whole thing down until we sort the line." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." I shrugged. "Please do. Ask them to bring copies of the call log so we can memorialize the timeline." She made the call. I sipped water and watched the tile line continue its steady descent, the white band growing like a new moon, the water on my side dropping until the slope of the basin made it clear I'd soon be sucking air. Moose, who had been snoring at my feet, lifted his head when he heard sirens. 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up. One deputy, a man whose forearms had the permanent tan of someone who spends all day outside, climbed out and took his hat off. The other, younger, kept his mirrored sunglasses on. They took in the scene like you would with a family dispute where both sides already know they're not going to be satisfied. "Afternoon," the older deputy said. "We got a call about a disturbance." Marla stepped forward with relief. "Officer—" "Deputy," he corrected mildly. "Deputy, this man is vandalizing our new community pool." The deputy looked at me, then at the pumps, then at the granite cornerstone I'd brushed clean so thoroughly it looked like a museum relic. "You got some paperwork?" he asked me. "Plenty," I said, and produced from a folder the survey, the deed description, my letter, their lawyer's letter, Lara's stamped filing, and a bag of patience I'd been saving. He took his time, running a finger along Kimball's color line. "You got something showing you're on your own land?" he asked finally. I pointed to the cornerstone and to the boundary line etched into the survey that matched the angle of the deck like a barber's part. "Right here," I said. "I'm not on their side. I'm on mine. And I'm not damaging their property. I'm moving water that is currently sitting on dirt I own. I'm not using their power or their equipment. I'm putting it into a dry well on my land. I also have a civil case pending." I tapped the court filing. "Hearing for a preliminary injunction in 2.5 weeks, Marla's mouth tightened. "He is causing financial harm." The deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, financial harm is not criminal unless there's something more." She blinked, recalibrating. "What about reckless endangerment?" He walked the line slowly, checked the cords, the staking, the cones I'd set out like a conscientious crossing guard. He came back. "Looks like he's taking reasonable precautions," he said. "And if this is his property, he can do a lot of things you don't like, same as you can on yours. As long as he's not breaking a criminal statute." Marla's face flushed a shade that matched her cardigan. "Our counsel says—" "Counsel can take it up with the judge," he said in the tone of someone who has said exactly that 100 times at HOA meetings. He turned to me. "Sir, I'm not finding a crime here, but I'll ask you to be mindful. Keep people away from your side. Don't block the gate. Don't cause a scene." "I'll be quiet as a cat," I said. The younger deputy, who had been silent, leaned toward the older one and murmured something I couldn't catch. The older nodded, then addressed both of us. "If there's a court order by the time we get called again, that's different. Until then, this is civil. Y'all work it out." They left with the slow dignity of people who hoped never to see any of us again. Marla watched the water line, now clearly sloped, a quarter moon white. The pumps gurgled occasionally as they caught air, a contented hiccup. "This will not stand," she said very softly, not to me but to the air. "It will for today," I said, "and tomorrow if it needs to." She turned and walked away. I kept the pumps running until the intake started to cough more air than water. Then I killed them, coiled the hoses, and put everything away. I hadn't emptied the pool. I hadn't needed to. I'd carved out my side like slicing a pie with a laser-straight knife. Their lifeguard roped off the shallow end with a bright buoy line, and a line of damp kids watched me pack up with the open curiosity children have for conflict they don't fully understand. The next morning, I found an envelope rubber-banded to my mailbox post. Inside was a notice of fine from the HOA, addressed to owner. They'd fined me $500 for interfering with common area operations. I laughed again in my kitchen because sometimes the universe offers you material and all you can do is applaud. I took a photo, sent it to Laura with the caption, "They're trying to find someone who isn't in their association," and went about my day. 2 days later, the situation sprouted new legs. A neighbor I barely knew, an older man named Eustace who lived in a cedar-sided home down the hill, knocked on my door with a paper folder clutched like a Bible. "I heard you were fighting the pool," he said without preamble. "I'm asserting my property line," I said. He opened the folder to show me photos of his basement wall, damp, efflorescent bloom like salt, and a trickle line on the floor. "Ever since they filled it," he said, "I've been getting water. Never had that problem before." I felt my gut tighten. "They tie into the standpipe near your place," I said. "I saw the trench. They told me it was just irrigation," he said, wringing the brim of his hat. "I'm not in their association either. I'm older than dirt out here." I asked to see it. We walked to his house where the mountain slope flattened, and he showed me the wall and then the path the trench had taken. A straight line that would make any civil engineer twitch, ignoring contour, running water where gravity would do rude things to it. The HOA had, in their haste, overloaded an old system and sent a trickle under Eustace's foundation. This wasn't entirely my problem, but it was entirely part of the mess they'd made. I helped Eustace call the county, who sent an inspector 3 days later. The inspector, a woman with boots dirtier than mine, shook her head at the trench and said, "If they altered stormwater without a permit, they'll need to fix it." Eustace looked 10 pounds lighter. That same week, I got a letter on county letterhead asking the HOA to produce the stormwater plan and to cease using the unauthorized fill line. People like to say the county approved it, as if the county is a single person with a single brain. But most of the time, different departments stamp different things on different days. A building permit is not a hydrology sign-off. The cracks in their process were starting to show. The hearing on our injunction came on a gray morning that put a chill in my bones. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and coffee. The HOA showed up with their attorney, who carried a rolled-up set of plans that made a satisfying whomp when he put them on counsel table, like a fisherman landing a heavy catch. Marla sat behind him with a tablet and a mouth that tightened and released like a metronome. Laura stood for me. She's not tall, but her voice carries like a bell in clean air. She walked the judge through Kimball's survey, the photos, and the indisputable fact of the granite cornerstones that had slept in this dirt longer than any of us had lived. She didn't grandstand. She did the thing a good advocate does, made the truth feel obvious. The HOA's attorney argued reliance, good faith, and public interest. "We are talking about an amenity that benefits hundreds of families," he said, drawing a sweeping line through the air like a conductor. "My client proceeded based on approvals. The harm to the community in shutting this down." "The harm," Lara cut in, "is to my client's title and to his peace, and to the rule that you cannot take what isn't yours because you think it makes the neighborhood nicer." The judge leaned forward. "Counsel," he said to the HOA's attorney, "do you dispute the location of the boundary as shown on the plaintiff's survey?" "We have a conflicting survey," the attorney said, but he didn't produce it. "Then file it," the judge said a little tartly. "In the meantime, I see a color print with a stamp and a granite monument that matches photographs. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the association from using or maintaining any portion of the pool or deck that encroaches on the plaintiff's property, and from operating any fill line or pump that relies on systems on the plaintiff's property. We'll set a schedule for a full hearing and for appointment of a neutral surveyor if you want to fight about rocks." The "if you want to fight about rocks" line drew a strangled sound from someone in the gallery, possibly me, swallowing a laugh. The judge wasn't done. "I further find that the plaintiff's act of removing water from his own land is a reasonable measure to abate a trespass pending this order. Both sides will adhere to this, or I'll start imposing sanctions." Do we understand each other? We did. When we walked out, the hallway felt brighter. Laura bumped my shoulder with hers, a rare show of glee. That's a big first step, she said. Now they either negotiate or they double down. Marla approached, her expression doing that careful, polite thing again. We still believe this is a misunderstanding, she said. It's a concrete misunderstanding, I said. She didn't laugh. Our board will meet, she said. We will be in touch. They were in the way people are when they're also trying to figure out how to blame you. A week later, an email blast went out to association members alleging that a neighboring property owner had interfered with critical infrastructure and that the board was taking steps to protect community resources. I know because a friend of a friend lives down there and forwarded it with the subject line, "You're famous." They had not used my name, but they painted a picture with enough strokes that anyone who'd ever seen me buy nails at the hardware store would recognize the silhouette. Laura sent a crisp letter. Defamation is not a water sport. Retract or face another count. The board issued a tepid clarification the next day, a word smoothie that did not satisfy my taste for apology, but ticked the legal box Laura wanted ticked. Meanwhile, the practical consequences piled up. Without the shallow end, their pool couldn't pass their own safety plan. The lifeguard roster shrank like a drying puddle. Families who had planned summer birthdays at the new amenity were disappointed. The association started issuing partial refunds and threatening special assessments to cover unexpected legal costs. People grumble loudest when you hit their wallet, and that grumbling echoed up the hill like distant thunder. Through all of this, I tried like anything not to become the villain in my own head. When I fixed the latch on my gate, I reminded myself that I wasn't the one who moved it. When I mowed the loop near the meadow's edge, I took care not to let the mower's wheels roll on their concrete, even though the judge's order would have allowed it if I had a good reason. I wanted to be the person who stayed in his lane, figuratively and literally. If there's a twist to this story you won't see coming, it sits in a cardboard box. It arrived on a Tuesday with a return address from a title company and a note from a clerk on pale pink paper stock. Inside were copies of old plats and a series of handwritten deeds so old they looked like spells. One particular deed made something inside my chest settle. It showed the original grant of the standpipe easement that the HOA had so casually hijacked to fill their pool. The easement granted water only for agricultural and domestic use to 3 specific parcels, none of which included the tract where the new pool sat. In plain terms, they'd connected to a pipe they weren't entitled to use for a recreational facility. I carried the box to Laura like a cat bringing a bird to a porch. She whistled through her teeth, a sound I'd only ever heard from her twice. "This," she said, fanning the pages, "is leverage." We amended the complaint to add an easement misuse claim and sought damages for willful trespass. We included the county's letter about stormwater and Eustace's affidavit about his damp basement. We asked for appointment of a receiver to ensure the association followed the court's order if they continued to claim the rules didn't apply to them. When the HOA's attorney read it in court, his mouth did the twitch thing Marla's did when she rehearsed disappointment. Then came the part they'll tell stories about at the next barbecue for years. The board meeting where it all cracked open. I wasn't invited. I'm not a member, but I sat on my porch with a clear view of the clubhouse parking lot, which overflowed with SUVs and righteous indignation. People filed in carrying lawn chairs like they were attending a high school graduation. A neighbor texted me snippets. The room was packed. Marla at the front with her bracelet, Tobin stacking sign-in sheets, the attorney trying to manage expectations with a voice made for reading disclaimers. First, someone asked why there was a court order shutting down half the pool. Then someone asked why there was talk of a special assessment. Then someone asked very quietly whether the board had, in its zeal, maybe possibly built a community pool partly on someone else's land. Marla tried to spin. "We relied on professional advice," she said. "This is a temporary setback." A woman from the back stood, gold sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "My kid was crying last week because she couldn't have her party," she said. "You told us the pool would be fully operational. You said it would transform community life. Now you're saying maybe it wasn't even built in the right place." Another voice rose from the other side. "Are we even allowed to use that water? My husband says that pipe is old as dust." The attorney cleared his throat. "There are complexities," he said. "We are working toward a comprehensive solution, By suing our neighbor, someone said, a neighbor who wasn't even invited to this meeting? I didn't hear every word, but I heard enough. By the time they came out, the room was wet with sweat and accusation. The board announced the creation of a special committee to evaluate options. In practical terms, it meant they were finally willing to discuss what they should have before anyone poured concrete. How to fix it without trying to paper over a trespass with a pool noodle. Here's the first thing the special committee proposed. They wanted to buy an easement from me, not the insulting $5,000 plus pool pass from weeks ago. They came to the table with a number that made me sit very still. I said no, and I said it without gloating. The pool, I told them across Lara's conference table, is an attractive nuisance that reduces my peace and creates risk. An easement lasts forever. I didn't buy this place to share a wall with a splash pad. They tried a different tack. Would I sell them a strip of land outright? I considered that one longer. Selling dirt is giving up something you can't get back, but I ran the numbers in my head. What would that strip cost them to litigate for years? What would it cost me in aggravation? What would it cost the Juniper, which had not asked for any of this? In the end, I said I'd entertain a sale only if they agreed to remove the deck that crossed the line, relocate fencing, pay for all my fees and costs, and fund a vegetative screen so I didn't have to watch synchronized swimming while drinking coffee. I named a price that reflected the inconvenience and the permanent nature of the loss. I didn't ask for the moon. I did ask for enough that they'd feel it. They balked. Of course they did. They said it was punitive. I said it was compensatory. They said the community couldn't bear that cost. I said the community should elect a board that reads easement language slowly. We were at stalemate. While they hemmed and hawed, the court set the full hearing. Lara subpoenaed the contractor's records, which included emails where Tobin asked if they could just fudge the boundary because the older neighbor probably won't notice. That line, blown up on poster board, is one of those phrases that makes a judge's eyebrows climb like ivy. In the days before the hearing, a rumor started that they'd try to claim adverse possession, that by building and using for a short time, they'd somehow gnawed the line toward themselves. It was desperate and funny. Adverse possession is not a costume you throw on at the last minute. It's a long, patient thing, and courts look at it like you're asking to move Christmas. The judge swatted it away like a fly. The court found the encroachment willful and continuing. The order required the association to demolish the portion of the deck and structure on my land within 60 days, restore the soil, replant native grasses, and pay me damages for trespass and for the use of the land in the interim. The judge also awarded fees and costs, which made Lara's eyes sparkle briefly like someone who just found an extra chocolate in the box. On the easement misuse, the court enjoined their use of the old standpipe for filling the pool, which meant they'd need to create a lawful new source and do stormwater correctly. In plain talk, the party ended, and the cleanup was mandatory. If you think that's the end of the punishment, it wasn't. Not yet. The membership at large held a recall election. Marla was removed from the board by a vote margin so wide you could have driven a service truck through it. Tobin resigned. The new board, looking slightly shell-shocked but less combative, settled with me for a number closer to what I'd offered on the sale days. They didn't buy my land. They paid for the trespass. They funded screening trees and agreed to keep their fence as far from my meadow as the lot lines allowed. They also, as part of a consent order in the stormwater matter, paid a civil penalty to the county and funded a downhill drainage improvement that Eustace now brags about like a new truck. You'd think that would be enough justice for a man with a meadow and a hound, but life likes epilogues. After the board blasted that email calling me a saboteur, their new counsel told them to apologize in writing and admit they had no basis. They sent it to every member. Someone taped it at the mail kiosk like a wanted poster in reverse. I didn't strut. I took Moose on a long walk and threw his favorite ball until he flopped and grinned, which is his version of applause. When the demolition crew cut out the trespass, I stood by the Juniper and watched. They sawed the concrete, lifted the slabs with a mini crane, and hauled them away. The noise was harsh, but it sounded like a bone being set. Down to soil, Kimball arrived, checked the line, and nodded. The new fence went where it belonged. Their ropes stayed on their side. People ask if I enjoyed draining the pool. It was satisfying to watch water go where it belonged, but the best moment was when the deputy stood on my dirt and said, "I'm not finding a crime here." That sentence, that property means something, that a map is a promise, brought my blood back to a simmer. Everything afterward was plumbing and paper. If you'd told me my quiet mountain life would turn into filings and a binder thick enough to stop a small bullet, I would have laughed, out loud, honestly. I'm a tinkerer who likes clear sky and coffee at dawn. But when someone treats your boundary as negotiable, a different gear engages. It doesn't yell. It shows up with surveys, digs a dry well, and buys sump pumps rated for continuous duty. The new board is quieter. They fix stormwater and hire surveyors who listen to the land. Kids splash in a pool that isn't leaning on my dirt, and I sit on the porch. I kept the pumps, hoses coiled like green snakes, not because I expect to need them, but because they remind me that calm action beats noise and that preparation often looks like a pile of fittings. Then, a notice of non-payment arrived. The contractor had recorded a mechanic's lien using my legal description, my parcel, my metes and bounds. I went to the recorder for a copy and a wrongful lien affidavit. Laura called it textbook slander of title and gave them 72 hours to release it or face an emergency motion and statutory damages. The contractor's office manager admitted they'd keyed the wrong description and recorded a release the next morning with a written apology. Lesson noted: if you build over a line, you don't get to swing liens after. I skimmed the common interest law and the bylaws. The new board posted agendas, opened meetings, and required dual signatures on big projects. An audit exposed change orders approved by Tobin that didn't smell right. The insurer got involved. The licensing board later fined the contractor for ignoring surveys and altering stormwater unlawfully, not crushing penalties, but public ones, the kind that adjust behavior. One afternoon, a trail cam caught Tobin yanking a flag from my corner monument. Lara sent the photos. Council replied fast. He was gone, and everyone had been instructed to avoid the boundary. I saw him once later, smaller somehow, not in height, in heart. A kid from down the hill, Finn, started jogging past with a whistle. He stopped to ask about my dry well for a class. I walked him through the rock, the fabric, and the math. He said he'd been mad the day I drained the pool and then wondered why they built that close. He helped scatter more seed and said he planned to study hydrology. Curiosity, guided, is its own flow. Storms tested everything. The county's swale ran, the catch basin burped, and my dry well drank. The board president, boots not loafers, thanked me for working with them where our properties brush. Stewarding beats conquering. We finalized the settlement, mutual releases, and no admissions. And one extra line I requested: signage at the trailhead explaining surveys, easements, and boundary monuments. It's simple and useful. Read before you rely. Marla later handed me a trowel and said she's volunteering at the Historical Society. I was wrong about a lot. I'm learning. People can pivot. I built a bench on the rise so visitors can see why I fought. I take a photo of the stone once a month from the same angle, a flip book of seasons with one constant. A pass with Kimball confirmed this is how it was. That evening I lit a small fire, thought of the deputy, of Laura, of Eustace, of Finn, of the sign by the mailboxes, of Marla's trowel. I doused the coals, never trust a glow, and went inside. I sleep the way you do when the wind is up, but your roof is tight. Tomorrow I'll build something small again. And when I drive past the clubhouse, I'll nod at the trees and the fence on the right side and savor a truth that took too much law and 2 sump pumps to defend. Some lines are not suggestions. They're promises in stone. Friends, thank you. See you soon.